I think if you just maybe tried harder.
Oh, I tried. I talked to a therapist. I talked to my mother. I read every book possible. I took love seminars. I took sex seminars. None of it worked.
I tried everything except telling you what was bothering me. That's the first thing you need to do. You know, you go to a therapist, you go to your mother, but what about the person who you have the problem with? Let them know I'm losing attraction. Hey GQ, I'm Stephanie Yates-Anyabwile, a marriage and family therapist, and this is The Breakdown. First up, marriage story.
You're being so much like your father.
Do not compare me to my father.
Comparing our spouses to their parents, that's a low blow, especially if you know that they have this desire to be different from their parents. When you try to attack a person's family member and compare them, the reason why that's so cruel is because they probably shared those things with you in a moment of vulnerability when things were going well. So now what you're doing is taking things that they shared with you in confidence and throwing them in their face, and it's really hard to recover from that. At this point, we're just trying to win the argument. They're not trying to hear each other. The point of a good, healthy argument is to walk away, understanding your partner's point of view.
People used to tell me that you were too selfish to be a great artist, and I used to defend you. They were absolutely right.
All your best acting is behind you. You're back to being a hack.
You gaslighted me.
So what he's describing here is one of the things that couples therapists are always looking for, which is an atmosphere of criticism. We're seeing contempt here, which contempt is basically trying to be superior to your partner, belittling them. He's talking down on her acting. She's calling him self-absorbed. All of these things to just throw daggers. And what he's saying is that she was always critiquing him. And a lot of times in relationships, it is important for you to think about that balance of encouragement and support versus criticism. I mean, we'll never really know what the full dynamic was in their relationship, but for those of you who are in relationships, always be aware of that balance.
To go and someone else.
You shouldn't be upset that You should be upset that I had to laugh with her.
Do you love her?
No, but she didn't hate me. You hated me.
You hated me.
Just want to quickly here talk about the importance of when you are in an argument, try to focus on using the I position. And what that means is don't speak for your partner or whomever you're in an argument with, if we can even call them partners at this point. But saying you hated me, you did this to me, you're telling somebody else how they felt. Instead of maybe phrasing it as a question, I felt like you hated me, is that true? Giving them the opportunity to explain, either, verifying what you said or not.
I can't believe I have to know you forever!
Oh, you're fucking insane.
He was trying to direct a punch not to her. And so I view it a bit differently than I would in a moment where you have a couple where somebody's literally trying to intimidate someone. I view this as him trying to relieve some aggression so that it's not pointed toward her.
And you wanted so much, so fast. I didn't even want to get married. There's so much I didn't do.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Rushing into a marriage absolutely can lead to resentment, but that's not the only way, and it's not a guaranteed way to become resentful. What ends up happening with resentment is when we make a lot of sacrifices and compromises without communicating to our partner that these are things that we really don't want. If he really didn't want to be in a committed relationship or get married, those things should not come up later after the decision is made. So resentment often happens when things take a turn and we're reevaluating all of the compromises and sacrifices that we made throughout the relationship that we never communicated, we felt we were giving a part of our identity up for. In an argument, when you see yourself as the victim and innocent and your partner as the person who has done everything, you're victimizing yourself. That's not a healthy, productive way to approach any relationship or conversation. You want to come from a place of accountability, because as a marriage therapist, I'm never looking for who's right and who's wrong. Often what happens with couples is they start developing dysfunctional patterns that they both play a role in. You have your job and then they have their job, and the system just repeats itself. And so what I'm looking for are the patterns. And if I have couples where the person is like just pointing the finger, playing the blame game, then I'm probably gonna look at, okay, well, this is part of your pattern, is that you start pointing the finger and then you guys end up in these kind of altercations.
You're such a dick!
Every day I wake up and I hope you're dead. Dead like if I could guarantee Henry would be okay, I'd hope you'd get an illness and then get hit by a car and die.
This part makes me sad, honestly. I think people have different reactions to these kind of revelations because we really just don't know if it's true. I think what he's trying to communicate is this conversation, this experience of going through this divorce has hurt me so bad that I want the pain to go away, and he thinks the only escape would be to lose her. But ultimately, I believe that would probably bring him more pain, and so it makes me sad that this is the only escape that he can envision at this point in his life. I see this scene a bit differently than I think some people would see it, where they would just get mad and say, how dare you be so cruel? It is cruel, absolutely, but it is also heartbreaking. I hate when I see couples like this not end up together in the end because there was so much love. I don't think that he really wanted her dead, not at all.
Oh, God. I'm sorry.
Me too.
So that is probably the truest moment that we saw in that scene, is that moment where even though they've just said the ugliest things they could to each other, he collapses into her and she cuddles him. When I'm looking for patterns with couples, this is probably a lot of their dynamic. He gets really up in flux, she goes to caretaking and nurturing, and that's how they both ended up compromising and sacrificing so much throughout the relationship that they're now very resentful. It really just shows how heartbreaking it is that they didn't end up together. We definitely know that divorce rates have gone up over the years. I don't think that that has to do with people sticking it out. I think it has to do more with access to resources and the family structure kind of supporting people. You know, you had a woman who typically was financially dependent on a man, for example, and to leave him would mean to forge a new path that for a world that was really not designed for her to be providing for herself. I look at it more as now people just have so much more access to other options. And I think we have a hard time in this culture with commitment. We have so many things via social media, dating apps. We're always wondering if things could be better, and maybe they could, but in a relationship like the one we just saw where there's still a lot of love, I have a lot of hope for those sorts of relationships. Next up, Bridgerton.
Would you please ask Miss Nolan if my personal effects have yet been removed from the Duke's bedchamber?
Just to provide a little context here, essentially they're upset with one another because she wants children and he doesn't want children, and she feels like he lied to her in order to achieve his goal of not having children, and now they're in a position where she may be pregnant by tricking him. That's why there's a bit of tension here in this scene. Kids is one of the most important things that you need to know before you get married. If you're like, I'm 50-50 on having kids, don't be with someone who's 100%. Don't get with someone who has told you they don't want kids with the expectation that you can change them. And don't know that you may not want kids and think, oh, I'm just so in love that I might ultimately end up changing my mind for this person. Because both of those things are sacrifices for a lifestyle that will ultimately lead to resentment no matter how you look at it. When it comes to deception in a relationship, the reason why this is such a tricky thing is because ultimately it betrays trust. Trust is one of the hardest things that you can rebuild in a relationship. I know people who had some major lie that was told or some trickery that happened 20 years ago that still come up in arguments. It's always better, even if it's a very, very uncomfortable conversation, to make sure you are sharing with your partner what's going through your mind and the things that you want to try, especially the things that will inevitably affect the both of you. And while we're talking about deception and we're talking about especially like matters to do with sex, listen, male or female, consent is consent. So make sure that you're not making decisions on behalf of your partner, that you all are having conversations about what you're wanting to see next in your future together.
Would you please ask Miss Nolan if my personal effects have yet been removed from the Duke's bedchamber?
Would you please inform her Grace that I will allow no such thing?
I just want to pause here because this is a great example of triangulation, which is where you have so much tension, conflict, or anxiety between a couple that they bring in a third party to help relieve some of that tension. When they are basically playing telephone instead of talking directly to one another, it's a way of saying, I'm not comfortable talking to you, I'm going to punish you by not speaking directly to you. A lot of us have been that friend where you've got a couple that's arguing, you're getting called, or you just happen to be there, you know, you hate those moments, and they're wanting you to pick a side or tell them that they're right. Is this going to give you the results that you want in the relationship, which is to have healthy communication and get to the other side of this argument? So if you're being triangulated in, try your best to resist. But if you're in the relationship and you're pulling your friends in, just know that that's a sign that you guys have built up a lot of tension, so much so that you're having a hard time managing it just between the two of you. I absolutely do understand completely why he is frustrated with her. Anytime we feel tricked by somebody, we're not going to have happy feelings about it. But on the other hand, I totally understand her feelings too. If you feel lied to, that's also not going to make you feel good. So I do think that they both have a right to their feelings, but if they would just have some honest and open conversation, they'd be able to see that both of them are just really misinformed about the other person's experience.
You cannot believe I shall welcome you back into my bed after your lies and deception.
Rest assured, marital relations are the least of my concern after your recent efforts.
Then for what other purpose could you possibly wish to detain me?
Because you are my wife.
People could have different takes on this, but I actually think him saying, because you are my wife, I think that is almost an olive branch, because what he's trying to say is, I care about you. I don't want to sleep apart from you. And if we can find a space in our arguments to say, you are my partner, we plan to do this together, I love you, those kind of words, even out of anger, to explain your purpose, it can really bring down a lot of the tension in an argument. And you see when he says that, there's a moment where she's taking it in, like, she still likes to hear that he's referring to her as his wife.
It is customary for a wife to reside in her own bedchamber once the honeymoon is over.
I will be kept informed as to the success of your conjugal endeavors.
I would never dream of concealing the truth of such important matters.
Now, granted, she did already do some deceptive things, so it's not like she's in the clear here, but I will say in this particular argument, that was a good response. Don't worry, I would not keep that information from you. That's a really important way of saying, I still care about you, and I care about how you feel.
Yes, Your Grace.
What has happened?
My brother seems to have been embroiled in scandal. I must return to see my family immediately. They will need me.
I will accompany you.
This is a family matter.
Separate bedrooms may be tolerated. Separate households will not be suffered.
I want to pause just because, again, he doesn't want to see his marriage fall apart. And even though she might be picking up on that, because again, you saw that little hesitance when he said that, you know, she probably liked that. She's trying to brush past it and hold on to her anger. But in reality, I would assume that that makes her pretty happy that even when she's pushing away and being difficult, he still has a desire to be with her. I think it's really important here that we're talking about a family matter and her saying, this is something for my family. Once you marry someone, that person is on the family tree, so they are a part of your family. It's really helpful that you don't think of them as separate from your family. Those are some of the predictors of a successful marriage, is when we can see that good integration of your partner into your family. Your partner is there to support you and the family when they can. And I think that that is what he's doing here. The fact that he says, if there's an issue, I'm coming with you, that's letting somebody know I have no intentions of abandoning you.
I shall not let you out of my sight until we know whether you are with child.
Please request that His Grace prepare his largest carriage. I shall require my space.
Do I think he's really trying to monitor her conjugal efforts? No, because she's probably not going to be able to conceal it and has already confirmed with him that she has no intention to. But he's just using that as a crutch because it seems to be the only thing that works for him to not have to create even more distance between them as she's requesting. So again, I think he's being open. I think he's still being loving towards her. And even though she's frustrated and upset, this is one of those couples where if they were arguing like this, I would walk out of the session like, they're gonna make it. Next up, The Office.
Can you not do that? It's disgusting.
You know I have soft teeth. How could you say that?
Oops.
You don't want to criticize your partner in front of people. That's a sure way to lead into an argument most of the time. When we criticize our partners in front of an audience, there's a new layer of embarrassment and it makes them question why you're criticizing them. In a relationship, you want your partner to feel like if you're saying something negative about them, it's constructive. You're doing it because you love them and you care about them. Try to reserve criticism for your private alone time so that it doesn't seem spiteful and hateful.
Oh.
Hey, babe.
Yeah?
How about we take the beer sign down until our guests leave and then we can discuss it?
No. I'm gonna leave it up. I think it ties the whole room together.
First of all, we could tell that that was a very passive-aggressive interaction they were having there. And what does passive-aggressive mean? Passive-aggressive is when we're not saying what we want, but we're trying to manipulate a person into doing what we want without really expressing that. So saying things like, you can if you want to, when really we want to say, please do. So I want to talk a little bit about that sign that he put up because it's deeper than just being spiteful. Why, in that moment, did he choose to put that sign up? Whenever we're in the midst of transition, that can be very anxiety and stress provoking. If you watch The Office, you know that she has lost her job. She just moved in with him. They're a relatively new couple. All of this transition really leads to a lot of stressors in the relationship. And so when we start experiencing transition and stress as a unit, trying to find our identity as an individual and our identity in this relationship, what do? We typically revert back to our old self that's more comfortable. So he's literally saying, you treat me unfairly, you're unkind to me, so I'm going back to what I usually have up in my home. I'm putting the sign back up. You're not worth the sacrifice and compromise of not having up my sign if you treat me that way. So be very careful of that when you're in the midst of changing within your relationship. This is a relationship that I would say kind of reminds me of when you have a leech. I think that Jan uses Michael for whatever she can in the moment. He's a very amicable and malleable person. So he's flexible to whatever she wants. But as we see in this scene, when she doesn't treat him kindly, he's starting to get frustrated and upset because he's recognizing all of the sacrifices that he's making for her. So I would say this is a toxic relationship. Not that it couldn't possibly work, but there has to be some love there and things in the relationship that aren't just material that she's gaining out of it for it to work. A toxic relationship to me is one where you, by being in the relationship, end up having less self-confidence, you end up questioning your own goals and dreams, and you feel sometimes trapped in the relationship as though you can't get out. Everybody's definition of a toxic relationship is different, and it's a really popular term now, but those are the main things I'd look for before I would say that a relationship is toxic.
And I'm a candle maker, but you don't hear me bragging about it.
Man, I would love to burn your candles.
You burn it, you buy it.
It's all started with that criticism in front of an audience. That's how this whole thing has escalated. He's making fun of her candle making business. That seems to be the final straw for her, is him coming for something that she has not yet developed a confidence or identity in. When you know that your partner is trying to endeavor on something that is unfamiliar territory and you've told them that you're going to support them, picking at their failures or picking at them when they are still trying to get on their feet, those are things that they don't forget. So don't give them yet another thing to stress about when they're already trying something new and different and uncomfortable.
That is a $200 plasma screen TV you just killed. Good luck paying me back on your $0 a year salary plus benefits, babe.
Whenever we're having a passive-aggressive fight or it escalates to destroying property, I mean, this is very immature. Even doing it in front of people, that's an immature way to handle conflict in your relationship. So it really reminds me of like when you're on the playground and you like throw a stick and they throw a stick back, that jab for jab, tit for tat type of arguing. Again, the point of a good argument is to walk away understanding one another's perspective. If you're just trying to win the argument, then you both already lost. If I was at this dinner party, and I pray to God my husband would be there too, we would use this as material for laughing for years to come. When you argue in front of people, you know, you really are just giving them reasons to look at you differently. You're not just embarrassing your partner, so keep that in mind too. Next up, Euphoria. Who hasn't been in the position where you're trying to write something and you want to use the perfect emoji, the perfect words, the perfect acronyms to really get your sentiment across? And I think it's really good to highlight here, sometimes we really do need to think about the medium in which we're going to communicate certain things. Some people really do communicate better via text because they have an opportunity to look at what's been sent to them, process it, and then get their words perfectly before they respond. And sometimes if you just can't figure it out, maybe think about choosing a different medium. The timing with an argument is highly dependent on both of your conflict resolution styles. You have some people who really work best talking about it in the moment so they can remember everything that they were feeling and they can communicate that in a way that feels authentic and fresh. And other people like to have time to process what's happened and think about what they need to be accountable for. So I always say, if you have even one person in the relationship that needs to take that pause, always take the pause, because if you force that person into having the conversation when they're not ready, you're going to end up either in a shouting match or they're going to completely shut down, and neither one of those options is productive.
I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to fight with you either. You have to understand that I just want you to be safe, okay? I don't want anything bad to happen to you.
I love this clip so much because it's a wonderful example of a vulnerable and transparent conversation. Opening up with, I don't want to fight with you, that is, listen, my weapons are down. I want to have an open conversation with you where I can understand your perspective and share mine. Also, I think it's important here, a lot of these things that Zendaya is communicating, you wouldn't be able to see that via text or on a phone call. Look at how far away she is. Look at what she's doing with her hands and fidgeting. She's looking down. All of those things are communicating to Jules that she's having a hard time saying this, and it helps her develop more empathy in the conversation.
You know, you just can't be mad at me for wanting you to be okay. You can say I'm being anxious.
That's a vulnerable thing to say, because basically she's saying, even this conversation makes me really, really nervous. And when we can hold space for our partners not even being comfortable talking to us, we're really on track to something good. They're not even a couple here yet, but they're already doing amazing couple communication.
It hurts my heart too much. I'm not mad at you. Just the best thing that's happened to me in a really long time, and I just don't want anything bad to happen, so just please don't be mad at me, okay, Joel? Just don't be mad. I'm sorry.
I want to talk too about her recognizing in that space and distance and that body gesturing how uncomfortable she was. She knew that it was okay to close the gap and give her a hug. Sometimes that's all our partner needs. You know, they're up in flux, they're going crazy, and they just need a reminder, like, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to reject you for being anxious or being nervous or getting upset. I'm going to be right here with you, and I'm going to help you process this. That's exactly what she communicated with that hug, and I mean, this is just amazing conflict resolution, which is why I love this clip.
I love you. I really do.
Whenever we have developed a fondness or a good relationship with someone and that word I love you comes up, especially if we have feelings, it's helpful sometimes to ask for clarification. Be assertive. When I say I love you, I think of you as my person. I kind of envision a future for us and see if they're on the same page. That's the only way to really be clear about if it's a miscommunication or not. We have to be willing to have those difficult conversations so that we get more certainty and clarity.
I'm sorry.
So you never know, when you go for that big moment, it's gonna be a risk for any of us. That first kiss, that first I love you, and we don't know. You know, somebody could say, oh, they were misreading signals or mixed signals she was giving if she wasn't okay with the kiss. Well, we really don't know. She might be just taking some time to process what happened, and I think they end up getting together. So clearly it wasn't that far off the mark. But yeah, I mean, that moment, her anxiety got the best of her and she ran out of the room. But I'm curious if she would have stayed, if they would have just had a good conversation about it and maybe expedited the process to being together. The only time I view it as wrong is if you go for that and the person says, I am not comfortable with that, do not kiss me, or they don't give their consent and you try to go for it again. That's absolutely a problem. But with the level of vulnerability that they've established in their relationship, clearly they can be physically close. Going for that kiss is just a risk that she took to see if it could be something more. With our earliest relationship experiences, those really set the stage for our later relationship experiences. If we're lucky, we end up staying with that person forever and we have really good communication with them. We never have issues, but more than likely what's going to end up happening is life gets in the way. They have so many transitions ahead of them, graduating high school, maybe going to college. They probably won't stay together. That's typically not what happens. But if they are able to do a good job being there for one another, communicating well with one another, that really sets the standards for who's allowed into their space and later relationships. I love this clip because this is such a good example of healthy communication where they both just wanted to express why they cared about something and hear the other person's perspective, being open, being vulnerable, because honestly, miscommunication is the #1 reason that couples fight. Most of the time, that's what I'm listening in for, and once we figure out the miscommunication patterns, usually I can apply it to 10 different subjects that they've brought up in session. Next up, Malcolm and Marie.
Why didn't you cast me? When you first wrote it, you wrote it for me.
I want to pause here because the way she opened the conversation, this is the vulnerability that we need to see for us to make it to the other side of an argument. She's being honest and saying, the question that I have is, why didn't you cast me? She's heard that she was a part of the process, that her life is what this story is built from. And she's not saying it in a mean way. She's doing it in an open-ended question, which is a great way to communicate with our partners. She didn't say, you should have casted me. She asked, why didn't you cast me? And instead of him responding, we see here that it's met with contempt.
So that's what this whole thing has been about tonight.
No.
Bullshit, Marie. You're lying. Yes, it is.
That is not accepting the olive branch when our partner is trying to be open with us. He just says, so that's what this has all been about. That's a very different response that really causes your partner to shut down. So then when he says, isn't it? Her response is no. It could have been yes, because that's probably a vast majority of what has been bothering her. But because he put his guard up, now hers is back up as well. This opening line of her being vulnerable, it reminds me of the Euphoria clip. And it's a stark contrast in how Jules responds to her versus how Malcolm does. He responds to her by bringing another issue to the table and critiquing her, criticizing her for not saying it sooner, instead of appreciating the fact that she's being vulnerable and open and meeting that with a safe space for her so they can have healthy and good communication. As far as him casting her, I think some people might look at it that way and say, had he just casted her, they wouldn't have all of these issues, right? But there are fundamental breakdowns in this relationship that cause them to argue and weaponize and be critical of one another. So I don't think that him casting her would have solved all of their problems. As a matter of fact, her working in the movie might have led to even more issues in their relationship. The problem is the way that they communicate with one another. And I think that if he could just tell her, I would have loved to have you in the movie, I knew you would have been great in it, that could have solved this argument.
I was in that audience, and I thought to myself, wow, I did not mean to give all of that away. And I don't want to get into all the reasons why you cast Taylor.
If you see from the beginning of the movie, Marie is very big on arguing about one thing at a time. And that is a really important aspect of good conflict resolution. She said, I don't want to get into all the reasons why you cast Taylor. Earlier in the film, she even says, let's not have this argument. We're tired, we're hungry. So she seems to be a little bit better at paying attention to their cycles and trying to prevent them, but he kind of pulls her back into that cycle a lot of times, and they end up having these hours-long arguments. So often, people have no clue how their actions impact their partner. There's some things that you do want to pay attention to, but a lot of times things go over our head. We say the wrong thing, we do the wrong thing, but we have to be in a position and willing to be accountable when our partners try to communicate to us how something made them feel. And often what we do instead is go straight into defense mode, trying to convince the other person that that's not what we meant, that's not what we did, that's not how they feel, instead of saying, I didn't realize that I made you feel that way, and I'm really sorry. How can I fix it?
Leave it to you to spend the entire night burning it all to the ground, only to reveal that in the end, you're just jealous.
I'm not jealous.
Yes, you are.
I'm not jealous.
Yeah, of course you are.
Malcolm, the feeling that I'm feeling right now is deeper than that.
Here he's trying to tell her how she feels. She's actually sharing a lot with him about how she feels. How about instead you deal with what she's already shared with you about how she feels, and maybe you'll get to the jealousy. But why don't we deal with what she's already bringing to the table, which is that she's hurt. I think there are so many different understandings of jealousy. I think from a very simplistic understanding, sure, of course, there's a jealousy there that she had to endure seeing another woman in her place, playing her role. Then that same woman is on the arms of her partner while they are revealing this project to the world, and she's not in the forefront. I don't see why she wouldn't be jealous. I think jealousy has such a negative connotation that a lot of times we don't really want to admit when we're jealous, but being jealous is a part of the human experience. And you can use that to inform the direction with which you want to take your actions. If seeing that, for example, did make her jealous, then maybe it's time for her not to be a retired actress and start pursuing projects as an actress again. That jealousy can actually inform us about a lot in terms of our wants.
We didn't try, and that's the harsh reality of all of this. That same instinct that exists in Iman and in you, the instinct to self-sabotage, that didn't go away.
I didn't try because you didn't want me.
Now you want to play the victim. Now you want to say you felt like I didn't want you, so you didn't try.
So often we are in a place of trying to win the argument that we don't even recognize that we're talking about the same thing. She's saying she wishes she was in it. He's saying he originally planned for her to be in it, and he didn't think that she really wanted it. That's a miscommunication. And this is an opportunity for them to have a conversation and reflect on that.
It's the fact that I can't tell my story anymore. I can't articulate all the chaos that's going on in here because you already did. But the difference is you were able to take all that ugly and make it something beautiful.
I'm very impressed with her ability not to stoop to that petty arguing that he is trying to incite. She's still complimenting him. She's still telling him he made a beautiful piece of art. She didn't say, and what you created was crap and it would have been better if I was in it, right? Because she could have taken that approach. If I were to see this argument in session, I would challenge him and say, wait, before you bring that up, what do you think about what she's saying about her story being told? Could you see why she would feel like that opportunity was taken from her? Those are the kind of questions asked in therapy that will break up this type of dynamic, because then he has to answer my question, which is essentially what she's already been asking the whole time. Next up, forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Listen, I get it, okay? I need to understand what I did to make you cheat.
Pete.
Let's pause here. There is nothing you can do to make a person cheat. They make that decision to cheat on their own. Even if they're dissatisfied with the relationship, they could break up with you. You cannot make a person cheat. So your first question shouldn't be, what did I do? We've seen couples be able to recover and come back from cheating. I think it boils down to their values. If it's more important to you to make it work, if you can let them know what they have to do to build trust back up in the relationship, then sure, we can see a couple survive cheating. We see it all the time. But I will say it's really, really hard to get your trust back to where it was before you cheated, because in the back of that person's mind, they're always gonna wonder, are you still cheating?
I think if you just maybe tried harder.
Oh, I tried. You have no idea how hard I tried, Peter. I talked to a therapist. I talked to my mother. I read every book possible. I took love seminars. I took sex seminars. None of it worked.
I tried everything except telling you what was bothering me. Clients do this all the time. They'll tell me this big thing and I'll say, and what did they say when you told them? Oh, haven't told them. That's the first thing you need to do. You know, you go to a therapist, you go to your mother, but what about the person who you have the problem with? Let them know I'm losing attraction. When it comes to effort in a relationship, that is so subjective. It really boils down to like love languages, I think, a lot of times. So you might have one person who's like words of affirmation, which means they feel really good because a person says nice things to them, and they're expecting that from their partner as effort. While as the other person might be acts of service and they want to see you doing things, taking action, washing the dishes, those kind of things to communicate your love. So when it comes to putting in effort, there's a good chance your partner may not notice your effort because that's not what they're looking for. So it's good to let them know, this is how I feel love, this is how I perceive effort, and ask the same of them so that you guys are on the same page about what effort looks like to each of you.
I couldn't drown with you anymore. Don't you dare sit there and tell me that I didn't try. I did. You were just too stupid to notice.
I do want to take a second here to talk a little bit about the concept of letting yourself go, because, you know, it's hotly debated. If people are thinking, I should love this person based on who they are, not what they look like, but physical attraction is an important part of what initially attracts us to someone. And it is important to try to continue to be attractive to your partner. Now, I'm not talking about things like weight, because sometimes we don't really have control over those things, but maybe tending to your hair, making sure you're grooming yourself, taking showers, those kind of things. Sometimes we really do stop putting in effort, and it can impact our relationship, and it will impact our relationship. So I do understand where she's coming from, but her main mistake was not saying that to him and saying it to everyone else instead of him. One of the things that we'll hear all the time with relationships is you go through this honeymoon stage, and then once the honeymoon stage is over, can you sustain the relationship? I'll be honest, I don't think the honeymoon stage has to end, but if you are in one of those situations where you don't look at your partner the way that you used to, if you're just dating, it's okay to say that, and it's okay to break up. If you're in a marriage is lifetime commitment. That's what we're targeting and hoping for. You have to try to communicate that to them and see how long you stay outside of that honeymoon stage, because it's really not just you're in the honeymoon stage in the beginning and then it's over. You can go through ups and downs of like you're dealing with a lot of stress, so you don't feel all of these happy hormones all the time with your partner. You have to kind of be committed to the process. You shouldn't be with the person just because they make you feel good, because that might not last forever. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for part 2. We'll be breaking down more scenes of couples fighting.